Well, hi, welcome back to Kartzinel Conversations with your host, Dr. Jerry Kartzinel. That's me. I'm a pediatrician and I've been working with children on the autism spectrum for over 26 years now, and children in general, over 35 years. So, we're going to work on the gut today. In fact, the next four segments are going to be on the gut. You guys are going to become masters of the gut because there are a lot of things going on in our children that impact their behaviors, whether it be sleep or irritability or self injurious or aggressive, just about everything. So let's get going. You know, in my practice, very often I have children who just eat pretty much the same thing every day, and it's pretty darn limited, and they have diarrhea every day. So we wonder if we need to make that connection between what they're eating potentially, and that's actually causing the diarrhea, what they're craving is causing that diarrhea. You would think if you ate something and it didn't make you feel good, you wouldn't eat it again, but that's not our kids. So sometimes many of our observations are kind of hiding in plain sight. We can find them, and it's kind of cool. We just have to look at patterns. Sometimes the patterns are hard to see because they're not right away. For for food allergies, though, when we think of immediate reactions, like after eating peanuts or a shellfish, there's hives involved, or vomiting, swelling, difficulty breathing. Those are quite easy to figure out, but many food-related symptoms are much quieter. They show up as constipation, or diarrhea, or irritability, or poor sleeping. Um, these are a little bit harder to figure out because sometimes they're delayed. In other words, they don't happen till tomorrow from something that your son or daughter ate today. So they're not comfortable in their own skin. They're just not happy. Well, today we're not going to be worried about laboratory testings or x-rays or blood work. No, we're going to just try and solve the problem by our observations. You're going to have to be Sherlock Holmes in the field and try and figure out, are there connections? So we do know that certain foods we can be sensitive to, but not necessarily allergic. And the sensitivities will manifest with behaviors or stool changes. Now, how do I go about? Well, we talked about learning about patterns. And the patterns are, when did it start? Did we ever have normal stools? Or were we constipated and then developed diarrhea? Did it follow a viral illness? Did it follow a bacterial illness with an antibiotic? Have we always been like this? How was our growth? You know, we do the monthly, 2 monthly checkups, and we put them on the growth curve and see, are we gaining weight? Are we flat? Are we losing weight? We're gaining weight and we're still having diarrhea. We're having diarrhea and we're really skinny and thin. These are clues that something is not going right with that particular child. Then get dietary history. Um, my son was eating a sweetened cereal and chocolate chip cookies and French fries, bacon, and a gallon of milk every day. And we had the most horrendous smelling, gritty, yellow greenish stools 3, 4, 5 times a day. And they hurt. I mean, they burned. Are the children drinking too much fruit juices? Let's talk about all that. So, not all reactions are allergic. In other words, if you took your child to an allergist and they skin test them, they'll say, well, your child does not have allergies. Well, these might be a little different way of demonstrating to you that they have an immune system response to the food they're eating, but it's not the typical one that the allergist has been trained to see. That's, the hives, the swelling, the difficulty breathing, that kind of stuff. And like I said, these reactions can be delayed. In other words, what we eat today may affect us tonight or tomorrow or the next day even. The connection becomes a little hard to recognize. I know that. So we have to look at the symptoms now. What are you coming to me with? Are we bloated? Are we gassy? Yeah, stools loose. How many times a day? What do they look like? How do they smell? Are they disrupting our sleep? Are we waking up crying, irritable, behavioral changes? We see these symptoms in our kids on the autism spectrum, but very rarely do we consider maybe it's the fuel we're putting in the gas tank, and that's causing the issues. All right, so let's get down to it. What are we talking about? Well, the number one that you've probably heard about is lactose intolerance. Okay, so if it ends in OSE, lactose, OSE, that means it's a sugar. So lactose is a milk sugar. Sucrose is a table sugar. Fructose is the fruit sugars, and on it goes. So to digest these lactose sugars properly, we have to make an enzyme called lactase. Okay, so if it ends in ACE, it's an enzyme. If it ends in OSE, it's a sugar. That's kind of how we do things in medicine. And when we don't have enough lactase, then we can get gas, bloating, diarrhea. So that can be one thing that's going on. And the child always seems to love milk when they have this particular problem. And it just is not going to go well. So that's why we say we are lactase deficient and we have to take those enzymes if we're going to have that. But very often, it's not the sugar we're sensitive to, it's the protein. Now, these are the milk protein sensitivities. Remember, lactose is the sugar. The milk proteins, those are going to be a little bit harder for us to digest. And there's a lot of talk about the A2 proteins and the A1 proteins. We won't get into that. But all I can say is that we are not able to digest them well in certain situations. And that's going to cause the same issues, the bloating, the gassiness, the diarrhea. They can also cause behavioral issues. The milk proteins can cause behavioral issues. So we'll talk about how we're going to figure that out in a minute, because now we're going to move into fructose intolerance. Remember, fructose is the sugar of fruits. And a lot of these kids love their juices. When you give them strawberries or bananas, they eat a lot of them. They'll eat the whole $10 tub of organic blueberries if you let them. They just go crazy on the sugars in those fruits. Again, we're going to get gas, bloating, diarrhea, irritability, sleep disturbances. And the hard part is that moms will say, but we're not eating that many foods, and these fruits are organic. I thought they were healthy. And the answer is yes, they are healthy, but for your child, we're having a hard time digesting them, and we may need to remove them from the diet. So now we've talked about milk, sugar, milk proteins, fruit issues like fructose sensitivity. What about grains? I do have to put kids on totally grain-free diets. If you even say the word grain, they get bloated and gassy and diarrhea. I don't care if they're gluten-free or not. They're not doing well with grains. So what we do is we'll remove all the grains and see what happens. It doesn't really mean that it's an allergy. It's just a matter of something they're not able to digest. And that goes a little bit beyond our talking. I mean, obviously, you can imagine that each one of these pathways has been more or less figured out where the issues are and why these grains aren't good for them. I'm just trying to bring around a clinical change where the child is making normal stools, sleeping through the night, and just a happy little guy or gal who doesn't have those particular problems. Okay, one more. Soy sensitivity. Well, many cultures in our world thrive on soy. And it seems the cruel issue is that whatever you tend to thrive on, you're going to have problems with. So for my families where they're eating a lot of rice, they're going to have rice sensitivities. If they're consuming a lot of soy, they're going to have soy sensitivities. If they're eating a lot of dairy, like cheese, milk products, they're going to develop problems with those. It's just that's why I tend to look at what they're consuming most of. And like I said earlier, it's very often a child craves it. So I had a child in my office once who, while I was interviewing the parents, playing Sherlock Holmes, trying to figure out what's going on, the child consumed 4 lemons, rind and all, the whole lemon. He ate like an apple. And it's like, I think we have a problem with lemons. Oh, but doctor, he loves lemons. It just calms him down. Well, beside the acid in the lemon eventually ruining the enamel of his teeth, um, there's something wrong with lemons. And I had another child who went completely hyper, came in calm. Mom gave him one of the Tostitos, one of the Ito chips, and the kid became super hyper. He was up in my window, pulling the shades. I think we have a problem here. What we're saying is that these foods can cause the behaviors. It's not just autism behaviors. They're just not being non mindful or they won't cooperate. They're going crazy with the fuel that we're putting in their system. So, the idea that a food that they crave, now my son craved bananas and he could eat like 5 or 6 of them and then he'd hide the skins of the bananas all over the place. Well, we couldn't have bananas. Interesting though, my son could eat organic bananas without behaviors, but if he ate a conventionally grown banana, he'd go nuts. So there you have it. It's something in the gassing of the banana maybe that made it go from green to yellow. Um, all I can say is that observation taught me what not to give him so he could be a better version of himself, which made my wife quite happy, by the way. So, timing is a good one too. Where we think about what time did we give the foods. Now you have to keep a diary. I hate to do that to parents, but our memory sometimes, because of all the things we have to go through each day, isn't very reliable. So very often I'll have the parents write things down. Like his mornings are really great. When he wakes up, he's happy. On the other hand, I have kids who are hypoglycemic when they wake up and they're grouchy. So I have to look at all these parameters to try and figure out where the behaviors are coming from. And like we talked about with constipation, their behaviors are amazing after they have a great bowel movement, but 3 or 4 hours later, it becomes worse again. It makes me think there's a lot more stool in that colon than we think. He wasn't completely evacuating all the stool that we saw. So we may need to have to keep a diary of what they're eating and our behaviors noted and the timing. And our therapists can help us too if they're going to therapy school as well. But we have to track our food, we have to track our stools, our sleeps, our behaviors, our bloated belly, energy levels, hyperactive, and maybe the severity too. So now, what do I do with the kids? This is the fun part. The elimination. Everybody hates this, okay? I mean, but most of the parents who come to see me know already about the gluten-free, dairy-free diet. 80% of my kids benefit greatly when I take them off of dairy and gluten and sugar. A lot of these kids are sugarholics, okay? They just crave sugar. I remember rice is converted to sugar, French fries are converted to sugar, chips are converted to sugar, so sugar's a big issue. But I'd say let's go off of dairy first and see what happens. We wait a couple of weeks. And, Doc, it was a tough transition. We moved from cow milk to rice milk or coconut water, almond milk. I remember rice milk and almond milk, they're not milk products per se. They don't make milk. They use milk as a marketing term, but it's not milk. They do much better. Now, when we go dairy free, that doesn't mean go to goat milk or camel milk. And I know what's being said out there. No, they don't need any kind of milk product. We do that for a couple of weeks and see how they do, see what happens with the stool, see what happens with behavior, see what happens to sleep and irritability and language. I've taken kids off of dairy and they start speaking. I mean, we're working on the gut, but sometimes, like I said earlier, we get some other things that are really quite cool. So that's one thing that we're going to do. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut back on the juices and the fruits. I don't want to do that, but maybe we need to. Sometimes we can get by with diluted juice because they pound the juice down, and we're not drinking the juice boxes, and we're not drinking any of that. We're going to really dilute it down. I'm going to take it away first and see if that has an impact. So we're going to remove the fruits and the juices, and then the gluten. We're going to remove the gluten. Again, sensitivity to foods, causing diarrhea, causing constipation. I've had removal of gluten and dairy, and all of a sudden the stools become normal. And the child sleeping through the night. And the speech therapist thrilled because she's getting a lot more words out of the child. And on it goes. And yeah, we still have special needs, but oh my goodness, we're so much happier in the skin we're in. We're just a lot more pleasant of a child, which makes us a lot happier too. So then we're going to do all that, and we're going to follow closely how they do. Now, we can't do cheats, okay? So you don't want to ever give a child a toxin as a treat. If we've proven that dairy or fruit or gluten is toxic for them because it causes bad behaviors or stool changes or bowel changes, it's not a treat. It can't be, oh, well, it was a special because it was his birthday or it was, our 40th anniversary or whatever. We can't do that. Or grandparents will say, one cookie can't hurt him. We are, as I look at it, fighting for their life. We are fighting for their life. We have got to figure out where these problems are coming from and fix them and take no prisoners. So it's like I want recovery or as much as we possibly can get from the child. Pizza is a big one for many of our kids. That's a toughie. You can get gluten-free pizzas now, and you just ask for no cheese. You can make gluten-free pizza at home and use, a pizza sauce that's organic and clean. And you can get a non-dairy cheese, which is really kind of fun to do too. Some are better than others, and we can get around that as well. I know these kids are addicted to chicken nuggets, and either store-bought or at the fast food restaurant. Again, that's gluten in that coating. So very often you'll say, well, he eats chicken nuggets. And I'll say, really? The whole thing? Well, actually, he just peels off the crust. He doesn't eat much of the chicken. All right, you are addicted to gluten, mister. We're getting that out of your diet. They'll eat the dog food because it's got gluten in it. Okay, I've had kids do that. They know where the gluten is. And when you do these kind of diet eliminations, the whole house has to be on board. You can't have the other siblings in the house or the dad eating the good stuff and the kids got the less than optimal, and at least in his or her eyes, stuff. So at our house with 4 boys, when we went gluten-free, dairy-free, it was the whole deal. Everybody went gluten-free, dairy-free. They were kind of in the period of the Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one kind of thing. So they were all not excited about it, but very supportive of it. We take them out, leave Josh with me, and my wife would take them out, and they'd get their gluten fix somewhere. But the whole house has to be on the same type of diet. These kids, they may have the diagnosis of autism, but remember, they are not stupid. They know where you're hiding this stuff, and they will get it. So just be mindful of that. Okay, don't think you're smarter than them. They know it. Okay, all right. Now, what you do is you do the removal of the diet. Now, some of you have done this already, and we're still having diarrhea. We're going to have to talk about where we're going to go next on that. But remember, food reactions, they are real. They're often misunderstood, and not every symptom you're seeing is food related. I don't want everybody to think, well, if we just find the right foods and remove them, our child won't be on the spectrum anymore. But they will improve. Not every improvement is causation, but in my book, if the child's stools improve dramatically when you remove dairy and then you add, say, dairy back and they get worse again, it's a pretty good causation point for me. We have to have thoughtful observations, careful investigation, informed decision making. That's kind of how I approach this. It's not rocket science, it's just opening your mind up. So we're going to look at our kids' diets. We're going to look at our children's stools. Our job is to try to recognize patterns between what they're eating and all. And a sticky point sometimes is, well, he or she won't eat anything if I don't give them something that we're trying to remove. That's a tough one. You probably have to work with your physician on that. The old adage would be, well, if he or she gets hungry enough, they will eat. Not necessarily in my practice. Why? Because they don't react to stimuli the same way. So, autism is a collection of inappropriate responses to everyday stimuli. That's why they're so hard to potty train sometimes, because they just don't respond to a full bladder or a full rectum. They don't respond well to transitioning from wake to sleep. They don't respond well to certain foods that you're trying to feed them, just inappropriate responses to everyday stimuli. They may not feel hungry. They may not feel hungry. And basically, if they could use their words, if you don't want to give me what I want to eat, I'm not going to eat. And have a nice day. The other thing, too, is sometimes you have to find out if that's the case, which is very, very hard for moms because their DNA is wired to feed their baby. And they'll feed them. You can't imagine. Would you believe moms out there feed their kids goldfish? If you're one of those moms, I'm smiling. Yeah, they feed them all kinds of stuff because they have to eat. So we're meeting their caloric needs. And some of them are very large children because we're definitely meeting their caloric needs, but certainly not their nutritional needs. In the long run, that's what I'm looking for. They will improve if we can figure out the food allergy. So keep observing, keep documenting. And next time we meet, we're going to be talking about I have to go to the lab. I got to figure this out. We need to get some stool samples. We need to get blood work. We're going to talk about what kind of labs to have you ask your physician for. All right? So, in the meantime, keep learning, keep observing, and I look so forward to talking to you next time. This is, it's kind of fun playing Sherlock Holmes. A lot's on the line when it's your child, though, so you really have to work at this. Okay? Remember, subscribe, hit that button, and we'd love to be able to stay in closer communication with you. And if you know anybody else who would benefit from Kartzinel Conversations, please pass this on to them. I want you to have a wonderful week. I'll see you all next week now. You guys take care. Bye-bye.